one of her main talking points about greedy corporate America being to blame for the inflation, right? She's like, it's definitely not me, and it's definitely not Joe Biden's policies. It's greedy corporate America. Because apparently they weren't greedy last year or the year before or the year before that. Like, okay, I don't know. Like, did they just get greedy just under Biden just in the past 3 months? Her talking point made its way into Jen Psaki's mouth this week as Psaki tried to dismiss our inflationary woes, in particular in the meat industry, as follows. Listen.
American families digest inflation is by price increases. And if you look at industry to industry, it's a little different. So, for example, the president, the secretary of agriculture have both spoken to what we've seen as the greed of meat conglomerates. That is an area where people go to the grocery store and they're trying to buy a pound of meat, 2 pounds of meat, 10 pounds of meat. The prices are higher. That is, in his view, and the view of our Secretary of Agriculture, because of, you could call it corporate greed, sure. You could call it jacking up prices during a pandemic. There are other areas where we've seen increases because of supply chain issues, and we're seeing those increases around the world as it relates to gas prices, oil supply, and things along those lines. So I would say there's some areas where we have seen corporations profit from the pandemic.
Wow. So just as a recap, we passed infrastructure spending, which is over $1 trillion. Prior to that, they spent $1.9 trillion on the American Rescue Plan. And in there were a bunch of goodies for American meat providers. They actually gave them $600 million worth of subsidies because they were flailing in response to the pandemic. So it's like they're flailing or they're greedy corporate overlords. Like why'd you give them, if they're greedy corporate overlords, why'd you give them $600 million? You explain to me what's going on here with respect to our greedy corporate overlords in the meat industry and elsewhere, Dave Ramsey.
Well, I mean, that's obviously a false narrative. That's ridiculous. There's always been greed. There will always be greed. But here's the thing. If one producer of beef raised their prices to the level they are now, and the rest of them saw an opportunity to sell more beef by not raising their prices and undercutting their competition, the power of the marketplace would cause the prices to correct themselves. And so greed doesn't work as an explanation for price increases. You'd have to get the entire industry to collude, which is virtually impossible, number one. But number two, in that industry, getting a bunch of ranchers to collude on something and agree on anything, not a chance. Mm-hmm. So it's just ridiculous.